Scaling a business isn't all glossy headlines and overnight success. It's messy, it's tough, and it's full of lessons that no one warns you about. I'm Nikki Jupp, the founder of Talent Gateway, and I've helped over 100 scale-ups to build the right team, enabling them to grow with confidence. This is Scaling Stories Unfiltered, where founders, CEOs and scale-up leaders share what really happens behind the scenes. No fluff, no filler, just honest conversations to help you scale smarter. So let's get into it.
I think persistence is probably the most important ingredient of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Just really thinking, how can it be done? Is there a little angle here? Where is it? It's just got to be found. So that's how I've approached a lot of challenges.
Today, we're diving into the dynamic world of entrepreneurship with someone who's truly mastered the art of reinvention. Dan Martin's journey began as a 16-year-old electrician apprentice, and since then he's literally electrified the business world, quite literally. As the co-founder and CEO of Elmtronics, Dan played a pivotal role in advancing the UK's electric vehicle charging infrastructure, leading to a successful acquisition by Mer, a subsidiary of Europe's largest renewable energy provider, Statkraft. But Dan's entrepreneurial spirit didn't stop there. He's ventured into the tech realm with Swarm, aiming to revolutionise energy management for homes and businesses. Now he's channeling his passion into the world of spirits as the founder and chief rum runner at Black Bee Rum, bringing a buzz to the beverage industry. In this episode, we'll explore Dan's career so far, discussing the highs and lows of scaling businesses, the courage it takes to hit the stop button when things aren't going to plan, and the invaluable lessons he's gathered along the way. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply intrigued by the stories behind successful and unsuccessful ventures, this conversation promises to offer great insights and a whole load of inspiration. So let's get started. So, Dan, your entrepreneurial journey started very humbly at the age of 16, I believe, when you and Anthony met one another. The research that I've done said you met at a bus stop. You were both young electricians, I believe, at that point. You then went on to set up Elm EV, then Elmtronics, Swarm, and now your brand new, soon to be born rum company. What pulled you towards setting up your own business from the early days?
Yeah, all right. So it's a funny one, actually, because when I was, like you say, a young electrician, I'd be on the building sites, and at lunchtime, generally, the guys were all sitting reading newspapers, and they'd be reading The Sun or The Mirror or whatever. And I've got a copy of Dalton's for Business, which is a business directory where you can people advertise
Yes.
their fish and chip shops or whatever. And I'm sitting, and I used to put inside a copy of the Daily Star. So the lads didn't know I was reading it. I would have been ridiculed. And it was at that point, and why I used to do that, I don't quite know, to be honest with you. I don't know why, but I've always had this pull to want to have my own business. And I think what it was is, with a business or being self-employed, the boundaries of what you can achieve and where you can go and your ambition are all taken off. So it's enough for me. When I was working for a company, I felt I had these barriers around us.
Yes.
And I felt there was only so far I could really go within that organisation or the industry as a whole. So the thought of having my own business was that freedom of pulling that off. And I thought, okay, if I work really super hard, then, and I don't have these boundaries, then hopefully I should be successful. And that's the catalyst, I think.
It's interesting. I think I've always had that pull myself from very early, just that real interest. Like years ago when they started the Young Enterprise it was a bit, oh, I think it was very early doors back then. And I've always had that draw. And it was always there, even in the corporate world, hence ultimately why I didn't stay in that. But feeling a little bit, doing it a little bit with a straitjacket on. So I can completely get that. But you then went on to initially grow the business from nothing to just shy of 500,000 turnover. What was your approach to getting such rapid growth?
Yeah, that's right.
See, but what was it that is fast growth? How did you approach that with limited resources?
Yeah, it was interesting because our growth from what we started off with, just me and Anthony working out of the barn. We grew it really quick, but also that was the demise of the company. It's quite an interesting story. So we found out that there was a government-backed loan for people to have electric car chargers installed. So we jumped onto that really quickly. We put the second car charger in the UK under this grant, and we found it was there, and we thought this is a great opportunity. People can get charge points subsidized. But it was really early on as well, so we didn't really know a lot about it. So we had to do a lot of education. But we kind of jumped on it really quick. And I remember it was maybe a month into it. I said to Anthony, I'm going to advertise on the radio. I want to advertise on the radio. And he said, what are you talking about? He said that it costs a fortune. And I said, yeah, but if I can speak to them and tell them what an opportunity it was. So I remember going down to Metro FM, which is on Swan House roundabout in Newcastle. A big regional radio station, the biggest. I went down, knocked on the door, went in, just asked if I could speak to someone about creating an ad. And I remember going up and speaking to the creative director there. Okay, what do you want to do? Yeah, I told him what I wanted to do. I want to create an ad there, put it out there. He said, what's your budget? And I said, this is the rub. I don't actually have a budget. We're really starting from scratch. And I think the audacity of someone walking in, wanting a radio advert made and put out there with no money was the reason that he backed it. I remember him laughing and rocking back in his chair and saying, no one's ever done this before. Okay, he said, how about we set something up, we create something, we put it out there, and if it starts to be successful, then obviously you can take a fee from that and you can back pay us. So yeah, the guys from Metro FM helped us a lot by putting it out there, and then we had a jingle made as well. And from that point, it started to really snowball. Everyone started to notice it, and everyone wanted one, and it kind of just grew and grew. But with that, what we didn't realise, and this is something that we learned, is government grants come in really quickly.
Yeah.
But they get taken away really quickly as well. And we had a week's notice that the government grant was being pulled. Change of party or whatever, or strategy. And unfortunately, at that point, we built such a business, kind of doing £500,000 in that first year. It was going gangbusters. But then I had a lot of staff, a lot of teams and office, everything else. And the grant was pulled, and we just couldn't react quickly enough to it, which unfortunately meant our first business, it crashed and burned, unfortunately. So we kind of sat scratching our heads a bit on what to do next.
And I think that's really interesting. There's a few things in there. So and I know we're not all the same, that's obvious, but to have that, whether it's confidence, whether it's that sort of just will to, most people would say, I can't do a radio advert. They'd stop at that first no. What do you think it is that made you go, it's not a no, it's a, we could do it, but this way? Is that something that is just in you?
I think every challenge has a solution, and there's multiple different ways of looking at it. You can look at it front on and See, I can't climb over that wall, but
Yeah.
I'm looking for a ladder. I'm looking for a rope. I'm having a look around the side. There's several ways of overcoming an obstacle. And I think persistence is probably the most important ingredient of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Just really thinking, how can it be done? Is there a little angle here? Where is it? It's just got to be found. So that's how I've approached a lot of challenges over the
And
years.
how does that dynamic work between you and Anthony? You've obviously got a great partnership. So my first question is, how does that work? And then when you had to go beyond you and Anthony, how do you achieve that, knowing that you've clearly got good chemistry? So just starting with you and Anthony first.
Me and Anthony, like you mentioned, we met at the bus stop when we were 16 on our way to college, got on like a house on fire, and became firm friends. And when we set up EV in 2013, Anthony had been working, I had a small electrical contracting firm that set up in 2010. Anthony had been working with me. But Anthony's very detail orientated, very organized, very technical. He really drills into something. And I was always the one that went out there, talked to people. I was very comfortable presenting. I was comfortable selling, and I loved the marketing side.
Yes.
So I was more the kind of creative sales, that kind of front end. And I really enjoyed leading people as well, building people up, building teams. That was what I got a lot out of. So where I lacked Anthony, Sean, and vice versa, I've always known 5% about everything, and Anthony's known kind of 95% about 3 or 4 things.
Yes.
And that's important, where I think if you had two showmen, if you like, it wouldn't work. Or if you had two really technical kind of operational process-driven people, then I don't think it would work either. So the blend was the magic ingredient to the several businesses that we had together. Yeah.
And so we'll move on to what you did from those grants being taken away. But if we just stick with the people side of it, so you've got you and Anthony that have clearly got this great chemistry. As people, you get on. Some people don't, and they can still work together, but clearly you guys do. How do you make sure that you bring other people on that complement, I guess is the best word, when you're expanding a leadership team, which ultimately you must have gone on to do when you had Elmtronics?
Yes. So I'm a firm believer that the foundation of a great company, that the absolute foundation of a great company is the culture. And culture is not something that you introduce when you get to 50 people or 100 people or 1,000 people. It's from day one, employee one. And fundamentally, if I had to boil down what culture is about, it's about how you approach shared values, and it's about a mutual respect. I think, to be honest with you, treating people how you want to be treated. And that means employees or team members, it means suppliers, the people that you work with, and it means customers as well. So it's everyone within your ecosystem. It's looking after them, treating them like you want to be treated. And if you can, it's often a hard thing. I think sometimes people become complacent. You can get angry with customers at times. You can get angry with suppliers, but I think, and certainly with team members as well, but it's making sure everyone's dancing to the same beat. And then sometimes if you get someone that isn't dancing to the beat and they're not treating people in the right way or not sharing the way that your ethics or how you want to run a company and look after everyone, then they'll stand out a mile, and it's just sometimes they just don't fit the culture. It's rare, but it does happen. And it's nothing on them. It's just that sometimes they don't fit.
Absolutely. And often people don't like that terminology fit because they think that what you mean when you talk about fit, 'cause I'm a massive advocate of this, when we're away from Scaling Stories, obviously I do a lot about hiring, and particularly around that leadership team and the culture piece. And I call it conscious leaders, people like yourself who from the beginning have a sense of, what do I want to create from a cultural perspective? It doesn't necessarily mean you write it down, whether it's behaviours, whatever. And that is where the magic happens in companies. Those who can communicate that with some form of clarity means that it lives and breathes inside the company. So from an operational point of view, how do you make sure, if people are listening, how do they make sure that they bring people on board and get that as right as they can so that they make less mistakes when they're hiring new people?
Yeah, so I think it's one, obviously doing some research on the person. I think you get from an interview is less about people's technical ability or what they've done in the past. It's a character assessment, ultimately. That's all you're doing. And you'll know within 20 seconds of an interview if that person's right for the business. When I was interviewing, or when my teams were interviewing, what we used to do is we used to tell them what we were about. We would talk to them first, but tell them and really lay out what we were about, and how they reacted to that was all telling, to be honest with you. To know if that individual was right for the business or we were right for them. And I think being honest with each other is super important. And that's something that we always did as well. We didn't go, this is the best company in the world. We'd say, this is what we're about, this is what we're good at, this is what we're not so good at. And that honesty, I think, is really important, and people can make a measured decision on where the right fit for them and vice versa.
Yeah.
So we try to get that out. So, for example, in an interview, I would never, and this is totally sometimes the wrong thing to do, and I used to get pulled up on it sometimes, is asking less questions about their technical ability and more about them.
Yeah.
You know, what are you up to? What do you like doing? What's a weekend look like for you? What do you like eating? Do you like socialising? What's your favourite sport? Have you got pets? Where'd you go on holiday? All of this stuff relaxes people. And then you can see the personality.
And you can also see where they smile and those, and that's not the same for everyone because we all respond differently, but you can see where the light bulb comes on.
Absolutely. And that's all you're doing, you're trying to pull out triggers and things where you can read a person really well from how they respond to questions that they weren't expecting.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that I found I have a child with ADHD, and so I'm quite a smiley person, and she wouldn't respond in the same way, but her light bulb will still come on to certain things, and it's about watching, listening, observing. That's why I think interviews in person are often better, because you see in different ways that spark and that response. So yeah, love it. And so this government grant changed, and you had this poop moment. What are we going to do, Anthony? And then Elmtronics was born.
Yes, so we built quite a bit of traction with NHS trusts and local authorities and etc. in the north of England, and we spoke to them and said that we were going to plan to start another company in a similar field, and they said, we'd love to work with you. You've been brilliant, this, that and the other. And some of them came over to us and we cracked on, and we opened an office in Manchester, Bristol, and we took on a financial director. We brought on a non-exec director who's at Shell, head of IT for Shell, and we did things in the right way. We just planned a bit more and learned from our mistakes with the last business, which is ultimately all you can do. And we quickly started to work with some great organisations, like say lots of NHS trusts, councils, fire, police, distribution companies and car manufacturers as well, and built the team up over the years to be there's about 130 of us or so. And we yeah, we ended up working with people like FedEx and BMW and Asda and IKEA and Sainsbury's and all of these amazing companies. I just couldn't believe it. But I think going back to that culture, I think that was an important part because a lot of our customers bought into that. That was really interesting.
And so at some point, so ultimately you were acquired.
Yeah.
And we can touch a little bit on that. When you started Elmtronics, learned from what had worked, what hadn't worked with me, was it always building the next business with an exit in mind to sell it? Or did that happen as part of the journey?
I've looked back and tried to remember exactly what my thoughts were at that point. I think at that point it was just survival. When we set up Elmtronics, we didn't want to give up on the traction and the experience and everything else that we built. And it was so early on the market. This was 2015, 16. This was when Tesla had just come to the market. It was really super early and there was so much work to do, and we built a really good reputation. We wanted to continue with that. So initially that was it. However, when we started to raise money, because obviously we were growing really quickly and we were scaling up, and in order to bring on more customers and grow, we decided to bring money into the business. So we did a couple of fundraisers. Now, realistically, in my view, once you start bringing investors in, the company is ultimately up for sale at some point in the future. They want a return, as you can understand. And that's when we started to think, okay, this is probably going to be a sale at some point. And also, no one tells you this, right? With a new technology, especially a small startup, you're on a bit of a quick trajectory, but you'll also, if you don't exit at the right time, be on a quick, slide as well, because you get to a certain point and then the big guys come in, the big EDFs and the British Gases and whoever else come in, and they acquire all the smaller businesses and bring them into their business as arms. So it might be an EV charging arm or, I don't know, solar arm or whatever, to complement their wider business. Now, if you don't sell it at the right time, you'll have all of these bigger companies basically taken over. And you'll quickly see that you start to decline. So it's really important to get that timing right. And it's only certain businesses that can punch through and compete against the big guys, but it's a very small fraction. You think of Tesla, for example. Very early when Elon Musk came in, had hundreds of millions of investment. That's a slightly different landscape in the UK. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah. And what was that experience like, the rounds that you went through? Grueling, I would have thought. But for those listening, just give us a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, raising money is pretty hard. Probably the hardest thing you'll ever do because it's the ultimate sales pitch. So you may do 200 pitches to all different companies. There's lots of, as well, the timeline's always quite long. So when you're raising money, generally you need money in the business at some point. You're not doing it for fun, it's to cash flow. So usually you'll think it's going to take 6 months or so. Sometimes it takes over a year. So you've got all of this gap where you've got wages and lots of expense. So it can be quite stressful. But ultimately, if you want to build and scale and sell a business, it's almost impossible to not do it. But it's a pretty tough process, I'll be honest with you. It's quite full on. And what it does do as well for a business owner or a founder or a CEO team, it takes you out of the business.
Yes, that was going to be my next question.
Exclusively managing that process. And when you're taken out of the business at a time when the business probably needs you more than ever, that again can add layers of stress and pressure. So it's definitely, raising money is definitely a 7-day a week, 18-hour process a day just to get through it. You do get there.
And then you've obviously got the due diligence process to live through as well. And that can be tricky, can't it?
Yes, yeah, it can do. Yeah, it's the one thing I would say, we had really good advisors, and advisors are worth the weight in gold. Good advisors are. We used a broker who effectively manages the process. It takes a lot. They become the middle person between you and the investor, and that's really quite helpful. Great, like good lawyers as well. You need them through a process like that. It's really important getting a good team around you.
Yes, I guess like most things, actually, you cannot do it all alone. And there was another interview a few weeks ago, and John, he was saying something very similar. He'd had one set of advisors that as they started working with them, it was clear that they weren't right for each other. So he very quickly made a decision, and the ones that ultimately he worked with, he said, were fantastic.
Yeah, that's really important, definitely. But yeah, it's always a bit of a stressful, and it's one of those things is when the investment comes in, you always think you're gonna have a bottle of champagne and a party. But you're kind of just relieved, to be honest. You just get a good night's sleep.
So tell us a little bit about that transition then. That leads quite nicely into that. You've been through this. It's obviously a roller coaster, but you've built a successful business that a large organisation has seen enough value in to acquire. What about after? What was it like for you? What was it like for your leadership team? Was it as you thought it would be once you were acquired?
Good question. No, I would say it probably wasn't, because I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. I think it's quite hard because if you've been running a business for a long time and you've been that point of contact for so many people, it often happens within an organisation if a buyer comes along that they want you in the business to do a transition,
Yeah.
certainly, which you can understand, but they also want you to get out of the way a bit as well because it's their train set. So that's pretty hard, I think, as a business owner. It takes a bit of adjustment. And I think that took me a bit of adjustment. We kind of kicked around for 6 months and then went on to do new things. And you kind of go from this world of traveling all over the world and going to different meetings and pictures and looking after everyone and investments and all this sort of thing to walking the dog. And it sounds blissful. It's like, wow, this is amazing. You're in an incredibly fortunate situation, but one that's very different because your life goes from a million miles an hour to 1 mile an hour. So that takes a bit of adjustment, and that's the one thing that I wasn't really prepared for, to be honest, is okay, what happens now? And that's where certainly I felt when everything was tidied up and we were finished with the business. Yeah, and I think it was a little bit similar for the other directors as well, where they felt that the dynamic changes a bit and it becomes very different.
So you're in this sort of new phase of, I don't want to say life, but you're in this new phase of business.
True, yeah. And life, definitely.
And you've got a slug of money, and you're regularly out walking the dog, spending time with family, etc. So you clearly got an itch again at some point. So take us through both the property, and then Swarm was next, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we did what you do. You buy your house, the house that you've always wanted. We also set up a holiday let company. So me and my wife set up a holiday let company and wanted to give kind of a 5-star treatment to people where they wanted to come and enjoy the Northumberland and County Durham.
I've had a nosy and they look really, for anyone listening who wants to go, check them out. I will put the details in there. I'll put the details of everything that you do so they can take a look.
Great. So we did that. That was fun. I enjoyed that because I managed to get my tools out and start building and doing. I like getting practical. And then speaking to Anthony and kind of scratching my head and wondering what to do next, we looked around energy management and we looked at, you've got all of this solar and everything else that you can generate at home, and you've got energy companies that want to buy it from you at certain times because it means they don't have to draw it off the grid, and it becomes it's good for everyone, and you're not having to create more energy if it's already there on people's roofs and they're not using it. So we created a concept called Swarm, which was a software and hardware product, and you plugged it into your solar system, and basically when it monitored the energy prices and when it was they wanted money, or you would get a lot of money for your stored energy in your batteries. It would feed it back for you, and it would save you money. So I spent about 2 years there, just building that up, building the team up, and getting that all kind of rolling and ready. And yeah, it was a great concept, a hell of a process. We created a product from scratch, both software and, like I say, a module we'd never manufactured before.
Yeah.
So going through all of that was quite interesting. So we had a really interesting journey. It was fun. It was fast, furious. But again, with a business like that, we needed to bring in investment, external investment. And the 2024 wasn't a great year for investment. It was quite quiet. There was not a lot going on. So we struggled, to be honest with you, to get that investment in, which ultimately over time, by Christmas, the business had the idea of the concept of Swarm couldn't really be realised, unfortunately. And that was tough to get at that stage and not really be able to launch the product. But also, I think what's important is sometimes is knowing when to stop. And I think the experience of what we learned over the years was it was the right time to stop, because you don't want to bring in more investment, or if it's not going to be realised. So yeah, that was a tough time, to be honest with you. It was something that, and I think we took a bit of a knock on that one, because we'd had a failed business before, but we'd had a really successful one.
Yeah.
And I think to go from that to having a failed business again was really tough. But we're big lads, we dusted ourselves off and put that whole experience into a learning journey, and thought back on what we'd learned, what would have we done differently, what should have we done, what shouldn't we done. And I think it's good to reflect on that, because it shapes the person and the idea and the future for you.
And conceptually, the Swarm product that the market is shouting out, but it, as you say, the right thing to do is to call it if you can't get the funds.
Absolutely. And we had a bit of experience behind us, so it just shows how hard it was, that landscape, for bringing external investment in. So, hey, we dust ourselves off and we start again. And that's what part of an entrepreneur is taking the rough with the smooth, the knocks, the ups, the downs. It's never a flat journey, and it never goes just, it might at some point, but you're always going to have lumps and bumps. And even the biggest companies, Tesla, for example, and we'll see what's happening to them over the last 6 months. That's just life. If you're part of that, it'll happen.
Yeah, and it's coming back to that resilience piece, and that, I think that's part of my motivation for wanting to have these conversations, because it's hearing the real stories that, look, it genuinely isn't all, because people will read, Elmtronics, they built this business, it was sold. Yeah, there's all the bits that happen around the outside, and it's going through some tough times, and you pop out the other side and looking back. One of the things I wanted to touch on with the Swarm piece is partnerships. For me, was a bit of a theme in terms of your ability to build some good partnerships. Sort of Elmtronics, you talked about Octopus, and you talked about some other large organisations. It looked like you built an interesting relationship with Opencast, and you introduced how that looked very interesting and something I hadn't seen before. How did that come about, and how did that work?
Yeah, so Opencast, we'd work with Opencast back with Elmtronics.
Right.
And they helped us with a piece of software. Now, Opencast are a fantastic development house that are based in Byker and Newcastle. They're really forward-thinking, great bunch of guys, again, with a great culture.
Yeah.
And we approached them at early days with Swarm, when we were thinking, how could we build a software product with a relatively low amount of funding, and would they be interested in a partnership in some way where they could help us to fund that and build it for us, and then we could both enjoy the success at the end. So the team at Opencast, they supported us by starting going through everything with us and building a software platform that linked up with the hardware. And yep, it was a great pair, and like you say, something quite unique, because you don't
Yeah.
usually get two businesses come together, a project like that. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, again, when growing a business, it's important not to have that tunnel vision and taking the shackles off, and as you say, looking round it, looking over it, looking underneath it. How can we achieve what we want? And often partnerships is one that sometimes isn't looked at closely enough.
Without a doubt, and it's something that can work really well. If someone's doing I don't know, £1 million development, it costs £1 million to develop something, and there's multiple different ways. You can go out, you can raise money, you can pay for it yourself if you've got the money, or you can partner with someone because a lot of organizations want to get involved in projects. They want to diversify, if you like. They want a little bit of industry or a product. If it's a service company, then sometimes it's an interesting thing for them to get involved in if they have ownership over a product. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, was certainly Opencast's motivator behind that.
So getting more, we've talked a lot about sort of the business and the business journey. Let's get a little bit more personal and more about you as an individual. So again, doing my research before the call, you often mention stepping outside your comfort zone regularly. Can you give me some personal examples of, by doing that, what have you been able to do?
Yeah. Yes. It's said quite a bit, isn't it, where I think the biggest one for me that always jumps out is public speaking or presenting, for example. Now, it comes to some people really naturally. Not many people mind, but it's one of the most nerve-wracking kind of exposing things you can do. So what I've really tried to do I've had lots of different examples of this. For example, I remember standing in front of the board of one of the UK's biggest companies in the Shard, in this huge boardroom, with me and my clicker pen. And I'll be honest with you, I couldn't even take a drink of water because my hands were shaking so much. So it was that situation. And it's almost like being on a cliff and throwing yourself up. It's that it's you just got a leap of faith where you've just got to trust yourself. But it worked. It worked. And I think as well, what I've always tried to do is be authentic. So that kind of us Geordies can turn the charm on.
It's great though, because that themes throughout. You think about the culture, you think about the fact that going out and building partnerships and having being a decent human being and having that kind of natural gift, and then making yourself uncomfortable to just push yourself forward.
That definitely. And another example is I was asked to stand on a stage in front of 170 business leaders and tell them my story, and that was just so, honest to God, I was so pleased I did it then, but for some reason I broke out singing halfway through and kind of
love it.
I'm thinking I'm just really pleased my wife isn't here because she would have ridiculed me. But yeah, there's that comfort zone. I think financial as well, to be honest. Again, as an entrepreneur, you'll take risks that far exceed what normal is perceived as normal. If you think about a startup's got 1 in 5 chance of being successful, if that. But okay, then I'm going to drop some money into that. It's gambling, and there's no other way to frame it up. To be honest, Nikki, that is probably the biggest comfort zone that you've got to get into. And if it's not money, it's time and it's effort, and I could be out there earning X amount, but I'm going to put my time into here knowing that I might not get anything at the end of it. So that there it's crazy if you think about it. Why people do it, I've got no idea. But we do.
He says, on to the next one. So your journey clearly has had significant ups, downs, plateaus, you name it. Are there any sort of routines or practices or things that you do that allow you to stay balanced, to keep pushing through, that other people, it'd be worth sharing?
Yeah, I'd like to give people advice to say that I get up at 5 o'clock and go for a run and get in my ice bath and I've got all my emails. No, I'm an absolute mess half the time, I'll be honest with you. I've got 3 daughters, I'm running them around. They want to go to running and they want to go to dancing and the dogs haven't been walked today. Okay, I better get out of them. I'm doing 3 houses up at once as well. So I'm half the time running around with a tape measure and a saw whilst trying to do emails and have meetings. I'm like most people, to be honest with you, if we're totally honest,
Yeah.
I'm pretty much all over the place. But I think there's a little bit of method in that. So I'm pretty sure I've got a bit of neurodivergency in somewhere.
Yeah.
And my brain, I've got a 43 and realise my brain it works well on multiple things.
Yeah.
Going at once. That's how I operate, and that's how I think, and that's how I can't concentrate for more than an hour on half an hour, 10 minutes on one particular thing. So I've graced that, to be honest with you. I've got the point where I've stopped trying to fight it. So someone will say, sit down there for an hour and do this, and I can't.
Yeah.
I literally can't. But it does work for me.
Yeah.
It won't work for everyone. And what I've realised as well is, where I can't do that, I surround myself with people that can, and they complement.
Hence the Anthony, hence the Anthony relationship, I'm sure, wife. And are there any sort of books that you might have read or things that you've watched that really gave you a light bulb moment at one point and you go back to that?
Yeah, so it's worth touching on that. That's a good point, actually. So I found Audible about 4 or 5 years ago, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe longer, actually, 7 years ago. And I try and read a book a week, or listen to a book a week, I should say. So sometimes I get a bit deep into the subject and stuff, but I love Audible. It works so well for me, where just touching on what I've just said, I struggle to sit down and read a book.
Yes.
Get distracted. So it doesn't matter if I'm driving, cutting the grass, or I'm, walking, whatever. I always try to listen to an Audible or a podcast. So what's been really helpful for me is understanding other people's journeys. A standout book for me, and I've read it several times, is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. So Phil Knight's the founder of Nike, and he started off by selling trainers that he'd imported from Japan out of his car boot track meets, and you know what Nike is now.
Yeah.
And I've never found a boot that's more inspirational than his story. It's just incredible and so humbling. But I've enjoyed lots of different books. I like biographies. I like business journeys because I can relate to them. Then I can, and whether it's James Dyson or Musk or whoever, they've all had ups and downs. You only really hear the veneer. You only really hear the Instagrammable with success stories. You don't hear of the battle that goes on in the background, and every entrepreneur goes through, where it's up, down, near bankruptcy several times a month. It's always the same, and I think no one really hears that. So it's refreshing to understand that, and what that does is it helps me to drive forward, and it helps me to be inspired and come up with different ideas, and that's been really helpful for me.
Fantastic. And now that leads on beautifully to your next venture.
Yes. So I've been working on this for 3 years. So before Swarm, when we just left Elmtronics, I bought a house and I found some beehives.
Yeah.
I was delighted to find that we had bees in them. And there were the Northumberland Black Bee, which is a fairly rare bee. It produces a beautiful honey. They're quite polite bees. And we harvested some. I got a professional beekeeper in to do this to help me. We harvested some of their honey, and we got a 30, 40 jars, and there's only so much honey you can put on your toast. So I started mixing. I mixed some up with some Caribbean rum, and made some nice Caribbean rum, and infused some vanilla and cocoa and pepper and a few other botanicals, raisins and things like that. And honest, it was the most delicious drink I've ever experienced, and it was more kind of alchemy, to be honest, than forward thinking. And I tested it on 18, about 20 friends, and 18 of them preferred that one versus 3 or 4 at a selection. So I did a blind taste test,
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, we're onto something here. So I kind of started the ball rolling a little bit, but then Swarm got in the way and concentrated on that. But it's always been in the background and something that I've been planning to do. And then I really started back up around about October last year, September, October. I got in touch with a professional blender.
Yeah.
So you can't just stick any old fresh stuff in there because it'll go off after about 2 weeks. I got in touch with a company that developed products for Brewdog and lots of different, and they helped us to get the recipe just absolutely nailed on. And we've created a bottle and we've launched the website and we've
Bottle looks amazing. The bottle looks gorgeous. Looks gorgeous. Again, I'll put the details in the description so that people can take a look.
Great, yeah, thank you. And we've literally just started pre-orders now, and it's going gangbusters. I'm pleased to say we've had a lot of interest from local bars, restaurants, and national retailers have been in touch. We've got people can buy direct. We're doing a limited run as well, 1 of 500, a limited edition, where they're all signed and numbered, and they've been flying out. So I'm really excited about it, like truly excited about it. Rum's kind of something I associate with spending time with friends and having a laugh. And we're just trying not to take ourselves too seriously, and we've created a great product, and I think people really like it. Yeah. So we're going to do music festivals called Black Bee Presents, where we'll have live music. We're going to be doing tasting sessions.
Love it.
Yeah, and a bit of blogging as well. What I want to do is we're going to go around the bars and restaurants, people I know in Newcastle, and we're going to interview them and tell us their story, a little bit like what you're doing.
Oh, nice.
And how they got into the industry and what their favourite either meal or cocktail is, dish or cocktail or drink, and we'll try it.
And you've got some T-shirts I saw as well. You've got T-shirts on there.
T-shirts, yeah, we've got T-shirts, we've got apparel. And yeah, so we're going to be pushing it in the Northeast over the next couple of months, and national by the end of this year. You can buy it nationally, and then we've also started to talk to international distributors for next year.
Fantastic.
So if we get that out there, it'd be cool.
It sounds fantastic, and it's great to see that couldn't be more different from Swarm and EV charging. So a completely different.
Yeah, something very different. Yeah. From clean tech, this is something I've been passionate about, that I've wanted to really kind of lean into.
Yeah, love it. Starting to get towards drawing to a close, just a few more questions from me, and these are more nuggets of wisdom, words of advice. What advice would you give to someone who was considering, I guess, they're in the very early starts of their career? For example, I've got a 21-year-old and they're thinking about starting on an entrepreneurial journey, setting out a business. Any advice that you'd offer people?
Yeah, sure. One important thing I do believe is to follow something that you're really passionate about, something that really you enjoy, you love, you live and breathe. So you might be into, I don't know, running, for example, kind of lean into or clothing. You might be into food or anything like that, or like jewelry. But whatever your particular thing is, and you love, you'll never work a day in your life if you're doing a business associated with what you're passionate about. Because you can talk about it, you can talk with feeling, you can talk with expression and passion, and excuse me, you can work hours, that unholy hours, because it doesn't feel like work. It's such an important thing to do. Try not to orientate yourself to something that is maybe just popular or something at that point, because it's all right for the first 3, 4, 6 months, but it becomes harder long term. Also, I think just try and look at something with a bit of nicheness. And what I mean by that is it's okay not to appeal to everyone. You don't need to appeal to 95% of the population.
Yeah.
You can really hone it down and do something that 10% are really into. And
Yeah.
it might be for a certain age sector, that's okay, or a certain demographic or whatever. But just, you don't have to appeal to everyone. In fact, it becomes really hard if you do, because you spread yourself really thin and become very general if you're trying to appeal to everyone. So I think the niche you get sometimes, the more magic there is, and actually the more successful you can be. It might not be as much of an exponential growth widthways.
Yeah.
But if you're really disruptive, really kind of getting into one sector. Last thing is, look at how you can disrupt something. So just because it's always been doesn't mean that you, in fact, they're the best ones. I love using Uber. I love it because you could always get a taxi before Uber, always. But you didn't know where the taxi was. You would ring them up. They will always just turn your corner at the end of the street or whatever. But someone would have to go and stand and look out the window. You didn't know how much it was going to be.
Yeah.
There was this kind of almost a layer of anxiety around taxis.
Yeah.
And Uber came in and it didn't create the taxi. All it did is took that anxiety away.
Yeah.
You knew exactly where your taxi was. You knew exactly how much it was going to cost you. You knew exactly when they were coming. It just simplified it. So if you can take an existing business or product or service and just make it easy, then, and I look at things like, what's painful in your life? Paying a gas bill is painful because I don't understand meters per square of whatever.
Yeah.
If someone could make that easy, which I haven't found anyone that can yet, if you can simplify something, you've won all day long. So that's my other nugget of advice.
Wonderful. Two more, if I may. You have built, scaled, taken some knocks. What advice would you offer founders, CEOs who are in a bit of a rut at the moment? They're stuck and they're a bit uncertain. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say get out the weeds for one, because as a business becomes more stressful or you've got more and more challenges, you get deeper and deeper into it, to the point that you're literally, I guarantee, sitting around the board table every morning. You haven't even had a cup of coffee, you're just straight into the issues. Now, it's important not to ignore the issues, but it's important as well to step back from that, and step back again and step back again. So you can almost got a helicopter view of the whole business and how everything interlinks, because that's where you'll find solutions.
Yeah.
No great idea has ever come round the board table. It's come when you stand in the shower. It's come when you're driving your car. It's come when you're walking the dog. It's come when you've fallen asleep on a night. That's when you get it. And it's so true. Sometimes we're just all so deep into it that it becomes messy, and you're only really focusing on one tiny bit of business. So that's something that I've always tried to exercise.
Yeah, and I often find your head hurts when you're so in on the weeds. It's like literally, if you take a breath, your head just goes, oh, I can relax a little bit now, or on the dog walk.
Go for a walk, go climb the mountain, and it's so much more beneficial for the business.
But often people have that guilt. I remember when I was first starting the business, it was like, no, I've got to start it. I've got to drop the kids off and then I need to start. And I would feel guilty about either going for a run or walking the dog. But what I've learned over the years is that, to your point, is when I can clear my head and you get that clarity, and you have your best ideas, you solve your problems. And at the end of that, you've had such a productive time. You don't need to be at your desk.
Yeah. Absolutely, and ask people as well, because pretty much every business owner has went through what you've went through. Pick a phone up, speak to people. Everyone, even if they've just got a little bit of advice for you, it'll help you to get through it.
Fantastic. Last one, and I always ask this one. Is there a myth that you'd like to bust about scaling a business?
A myth I'd like to bust. Yeah, I've got one for you.
Go for it.
Right. I've got a little secret, right? I've never worked a weekend in my life.
Love it.
Never. And the myth is that you've got to work, and I think I alluded to it earlier, but I was just exaggerating. You've got to work 7 hours a day, 18 hours. Yeah, sorry, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because I've always had a family when I've been working, it was the one thing I tried to protect was time with the family. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
But it's the point because the kids won't remember you being at home ever, or going to the park with them, or going to the cinema. They'll just remember that you dropped in and dropped out, and they never saw you. But you might have had it. They might have been able to have a better lifestyle. But kids aren't bothered about lifestyle. They couldn't give a toss.
No.
It's time. They want time. So I've never worked a weekend. I've worked really hard through the week, and I've been away a lot, just spent a lot of time traveling and stuff like that. But I've always getting home on a Friday night and spent the weekend with my family. And I think, could I have been more successful if I've worked weekends? Probably. Might have had a few more quid in my pocket, but would I trade it and go back? No, not a chance, not once. So this isn't a rule for everyone, because there's times that you have to really pull out. But for me personally, I've never done that. Try and get some balance. Try, even if it's a little bit. It's so important.
Perfect. And I'm finished. I absolutely loved that. I couldn't have asked you to be more open and honest, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have.
I did, yes, thank you. Yeah, it's always great to talk to you. I really appreciate you asking me on.
And what I'll do with everything to do with the Black Bee, so people can order their one of the 500, get in there quickly.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
And I'll put your details, your LinkedIn, so that people can find out more about it.
Yeah, so, I think everyone will love it. Thank you. Thanks for the shout.
I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, I've absolutely loved it, Dan.
Thanks, Nikki.
Take care.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So that's it for this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered. If you got value from today's conversation, hit the subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us bring more value and more real stories your way. Got a scale up challenge, a story to share, or you want to recommend someone that you think I should interview? Take a look at the link to our website in the description and pop your details in there. I'll also pop Dan's information into the description so you can take a look at the wonderful rum that they have launched. Until the next time, keep scaling, keep learning, and remember, you're not alone on your scaling journey.